Hey, Ruth, welcome to the His and Her Money
Hey,
Show.
Ruth.
Hey, thanks so much for having me here, guys. It's great to be here.
Yeah, and it's round
It's
three.
always great to have you on our
Dang.
show.
Yeah, you always bring
I
the
feel like
value.
I'm like your repeat guest now.
Yep.
Like your
Well, our
regular.
audience, they love you and we love you as well too. And every time you come on, you sure don't disappoint. So we're excited to dig a little deep today.
Now, there may be some people who don't know you, though. So for those who are just being introduced to you for the first time, can you just say hello to everybody and let them know what you are all about?
Absolutely. So my name is Ruth Soukup, and I am the founder of Living Well, Spending Less and Elite Blog Academy, as well as the founder of the Living Well Planner and the New York Times bestselling author of 6 books, including my newest book, Do It Scared.
We're definitely going to be talking about Do It Scared because
Yeah.
so many of us are not doing a lot of things because we're scared or because of fear. So yeah, we love that. So let's dig a little deep into that. Tell our audience about your latest project and what can they expect from it.
Yeah, so Do It Scared is one of those sort of missions and projects that is so near and dear to my heart. And it's actually a little surprising that it ended up becoming what it was, because that was never my original intention. Do It Scared is something that's been my own personal motto and sort of mantra for most of my adult life. And when I was in my early 20s, I went through this terrible depression, very, very nearly ended my life. I attempted suicide actually five separate times and was spent 2.5 years in and out of hospitals. And at the end of all of that, I was just broken and felt like I had completely ruined my life. I was at complete rock bottom. I filed for bankruptcy. I was divorced. I had dropped out of school. I'd lost all my friends and family along the way. They just had given up on me, and I'd given up on myself. And so being there in that place of just complete rock bottom, I had to figure out a way to keep going. And that was where Do It Scared started to be the little thing that I would say to myself, just do the next thing, just do the next thing. And that transferred over when I started my business in 2010. I felt like my life as an entrepreneur was exactly the same way, as it was, do one thing, then do the next thing and try the next thing. And often I was doing things that were so far out of my comfort zone that was the same thing that I would say to myself was do it scared, do it scared, do it scared. And so when my business became a little bit more established and I created my core values for my company, Do It Scared was, of course, the first one. The first core value that I knew that I wanted my company to have was Do It Scared. And so it was something that I would talk about a lot with my audience, both at Elite Blog Academy, which you guys are such an amazing part of, and at Living Well, Spending Less. And it wasn't all the time, but it'd be just here and there, Do It Scared. And I started noticing people really gravitating to that mantra and saying it back to me, or saying it in their conversations in our communities. I'd see the conversations. Well, Ruth says do it scared, so I'm going to do it scared. And so I was like, man, I guess I'm not the only one that struggles with fear. But then people started coming to me and saying things like, Ruth, I just feel like I am sitting on the sidelines of my life. I feel like I'm so afraid. You talk about setting these big goals and dreams for your life and going after them, but I don't know how to do that. I feel like there's something holding me back. Mm-hmm. And it got me so curious just to wonder, what is this? What's this fear that's holding us back? Why do so many of us feel like we're stuck or spinning around in circles and not making progress and not daring to go after it? But there are some people that are going after that. So what is this fear that holds us back? What does it look like? Is it the same for everyone? And most importantly, how do we move past it? And so I started asking some questions, and that just led to more questions. And before I knew it, and I never really intended for this to happen, but it just sort of organically evolved into this big, huge project. But I ended up surveying more than 4,000 people, and then had so much data and so many answers and so much information that I didn't know how to sift through it all. So I hired a whole team of researchers, a psychologist and professional researchers to help me go through it. And what we discovered was actually pretty cool. And that was, I think, like this big aha moment for me of realizing first of all, that not all fear is created equal, that the way that we all experience fear, but that it looks very different for each one of us. And but there are some very distinct patterns that we all have when it comes to fear. There's what I call the 7 fear archetypes. And we all, each of us have at least one of these archetypes that is most prevalent, but some of us have 2 or 3, sometimes even 4 or 5 that are working together in combination to make up our own unique fear fingerprint. And what was so cool about that is I realized that once you can actually identify how fear is manifesting itself in your life, that's when you can start to do something about it. That's what it's sort of like when you go to the doctor and you say, I don't feel well. And the doctor says, well, okay, let me run some tests or let me figure some stuff out. And has to give you a diagnosis, because once you have the diagnosis, then you can start to work on the cure. But without the diagnosis, there can be no cure. And that's sort of how fear works in our life too. So that was how it all evolved from all this other stuff. But also just like, it's been so fun to see the impact that figuring this stuff out has had in our community so far, and hopefully will continue to have.
Now, fear is a powerful emotion that we all experience. And I think that you can have a fear about dealing with fear, right? So you wrote a book about breaking through the fear, right? Well, first identifying how fear exists in your life and then what to do to get past it. But I think some people, over time, like especially if you've been dealing with things in your life, you create a coping mechanism. And in your mind, like you just gave the analogy about going to the doctor to get a diagnosis, sometimes people think they're okay, right? Because they've built up these coping mechanisms over the years and they don't realize that there actually is a problem. So how can people, one, why is it important to recognize how fear is manifesting in your life? And then why is it important to figure out how to push through it?
Well, the first part of that question, why is it important? Because we don't even necessarily recognize what's happening to us as fear. And what I've really seen over just the past couple of years in doing this work and diving so deep is that fear is so central to pretty much everything that we do. And it is the number one thing that holds us back from going after our goals and dreams, from actually accomplishing all of these things that we say we would like to do, but don't do. And whether it's wanting to pay off debt or wanting to lose weight or whatever big things that we want to do in our life, a lot of times if you really break it down, it comes down to fear. There is something holding you back. And so whether we call it fear or anxiety or just feeling stuck, it's all sort of the same thing, but all of it happens subconsciously. And that's where the real sinister part is, because it's all happening sort of in this, like the voice in the back of our head that we don't even know is a voice in the back of our head talking to us. It's just all of these thoughts and beliefs are happening automatically, subconsciously, without us realizing it. And so the way that we experience it is as truth. We experience fear as our reality. And we think that everybody else feels the same way. But the reality is that they don't. We all experience fear in different ways. And so that's why the diagnosis is so critical, because as soon as you can start to identify those patterns in your life, that's where it makes all the difference, because all of a sudden what was happening subconsciously begins to happen consciously, and you see it. And when you see it, you can do something about it. That's when you can start to either counteract it or replace those thoughts with other more positive thoughts, or just feel the fear, but recognize it for what it is and still take action anyways.
Yeah. While I was reading your book, I was very, very intrigued by the different archetypes, and you can kind of break that down a little bit so people can understand what we're referring to. But I was very, very surprised to see that one of my traits, which is perfectionism or type A personality, is actually a byproduct of fear. That blew my mind.
Did it?
I mean,
so you're a procrastinator.
Yeah. I was like, well, I never put the two together that I'm a procrastinator, because I'm thinking the term of somebody that procrastinates is somebody that delays everything, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And so you look at it as something negative. Now that I'm aware, like, no, that's actually a fear. You're right. I'm doing things to counteract that now.
Yeah, I think that was something that caught my attention too, because I think it's easy because, and you can unpack all 7 of them, the names of them. But I think when you read the titles for each one, you're like, nah, I'm not
That's
that.
not me.
I'm
That's
not
not me.
that. That's
Yep.
not me, right?
Mhm.
Because
They
the
all sound bad.
connotation,
Yep.
the preconceived notions that you have behind the title. So like I took the quiz, and when they came back people pleaser, I'm like, man, ain't no people pleaser, man. What Ruth talking about? But then when I got to the chapter that really breaks
Yep.
down the strengths and
Big
the
time.
weaknesses of the people pleaser, I was like, oh man, Ruth was right.
Yep. Yep. And what was so interesting was that I was able to go back to when I was a little girl. I've always been the type of person, almost like I will start over at the beginning of the month. Oh, if I'm going to do this diet, well, I have to start on the first of the month. I can't just start on the 16th of the month. Now I'm like, I don't care what day it is. We're doing it today. We're not waiting for the first of the month. So
That's
talk to our
awesome.
audience about that, because I thought that was very, very enlightening.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. The fear archetypes are really like diving into them and getting that insight about yourself is so, so powerful. And just like you said, like that's been the reaction of so many people. We've actually had more than 10,000 people take it now. So and just developing the assessment, there's so much crazy science and research that goes into that, where you have to ask each question like a number of different times in different ways, and both positive and negative ways, to make sure that like people confirm their answers. And then you have to make sure that there's no bias in the way that you ask the question. So we've had this assessment vetted and tested and retested by researchers and psychologists, like to make sure that it is scientifically accurate. And the results and the feedback that we've gotten, because they'll get the results and they'll be like, no, that's not me. And then they read through it and they're like, oh, yeah, it is me. It nailed me. I would have never thought that about myself. So definitely take the assessment. But I'll just run through the 7 archetypes. So the first one, the most common one, is the one that you mentioned. It's the procrastinator, which is really another word for the perfectionist. And the procrastinator / perfectionist, the underlying fear there is the fear of making a mistake, which can also manifest itself as a fear of commitment, but really it's tied to never wanting to get it wrong. And so often the procrastinator will either delay things, which is kind of the traditional sense of procrastination, or try to plan so far ahead, or try to research everything indefinitely, or try to tweak everything right up until the last minute, till the final minute, because it's never quite good enough. It's never quite right. So that happens. So a lot of times the procrastinator can get stuck in analysis paralysis, and that's where it can hold you back and keep you stuck, especially when it comes to going after big goals and dreams, because you're like always afraid that you haven't done enough research, or you haven't done it right, or it's not quite good enough. And that's where it can really hold you back. So that's the first one. The second one is the rule follower, which is the second most common one. It's almost a tie between the rule follower and the people pleaser. Those are both like they're very closely tied for 2 and 3. But the rule follower is, what that really is almost like an unhealthy fear of authority. So, and we probably all know at least a few rule followers, the people who are like always read the instruction manual for everything, but are also like very concerned that everybody is doing things the way that they're supposed to be done. They do not like things that are coloring outside the lines. They get very uncomfortable when they feel like they might be breaking a regulation, or getting something like some sort of standard wrong, or in some way, or when other people are as well. And the way that can hold you back if you're a rule follower is because you get so afraid that you're going to get some rule wrong, or not follow some regulation to the T if you're like starting your own business or whatever it is that you're doing, that it prevents you from even trying in the first place. And that can be really dangerous. And I should clarify here and say that each of these archetypes do sound negative, and they all have negative sounding names. And that's because they're fear archetypes. They're related to our fears, but they all do have positive qualities as well. So the procrastinator, for instance, has great attention to detail, and it has a really high quality of work. And those are all positive traits that are not a bad thing, and that you shouldn't be ashamed of. And likewise for the rule follower tends to be someone who, if given a framework to follow, can actually follow through, tends to have really good follow through, and will do things diligently step by step. I found in Elite Blog Academy that some of our most successful students are rule followers, because they follow the framework step by step, just the way it's supposed to be done. So again, always positive and negatives. So the third one is the one that we talked about also. It's the people pleaser. The people pleaser is the underlying fear of being judged or the fear of what other people are going to think. And so the way that that manifests itself is just always wanting to make sure people are happy. The people pleaser is the person who's kind of just always looking out, making sure everybody's okay, and will sometimes even hold back their own thoughts or feelings because they're not sure how other people are going to react to it. And the way that it's really easy to distinguish the procrastinator from the people pleaser when you think the procrastinator is afraid of making a mistake, but the people pleaser is more afraid of what other people would say if they made a mistake. They're always a little that's always on their mind. What would somebody else think about this? People pleasers, but on the positive side, people pleasers are great people to be around because they always want everybody else to be happy. So they're they make great friends, they make great employees, or just really so there's such good qualities there too. You just have to be careful as a people pleaser that you're not letting other people's needs dictate what you do, because that's where you tend to hold yourself back, is if you feel like you might be judged for doing something, or if you feel like what you're going to do is going to not be well received by other people. So the fourth fear archetype is the outcast. The outcast, that one's my fear archetype, but so I know it very well. It's probably the most ironic of all 7 of the fear archetypes, because the outcast is the underlying fear there is the fear of rejection. And the way that often manifests itself for the outcast is that you reject other people before you have a chance to be rejected in return. So a lot of times outcasts can be either very driven, or they can be almost like social pariahs, where they just have rejected everyone. But a lot of times that drives, so there's a lot of entrepreneurs, there's a abnormally high number of entrepreneurs that have the outcast archetype, but there's that kind of need to prove yourself, or to do it yourself, to pull yourself up by your bootstraps. But that can also be damaging if you're constantly pushing people away and feel like you're constantly being rejected, or you're afraid to trust anyone, and that can definitely hold you back. And what's interesting is, for me, doing this work over the last couple of years, is realizing just how much my outcastness has affected my business and held me back in certain ways. There's some ways where I've been really successful, but other ways where I've really fallen behind because I've been afraid to put myself out there and to reach out. So I'm working on that. So the fifth one is the fifth archetype is the self-doubter. The self-doubter is really the underlying fear of not being capable and not being enough. So the way that usually manifests for the self-doubter is hypercriticism of themselves, and just super self-conscious or insecure. But it also manifests itself in hypercriticism of others. And that can be actually really damaging. We probably can all think of somebody that we know in our life who's just so critical of everything. And that's probably a self-doubter. It can actually help your relationships if you realize, gives you more empathy to realize that that's coming from a place of fear rather than just not being a very nice person. So that's the self-doubter. The sixth one is the excuse maker. The excuse maker is really the underlying fear of being held accountable or being blamed for anything. So the excuse maker is that person that that never wants to be pinned down, that always seems to have a reason or explanation or just whatever. Maybe some of our kids are excuse makers. But it's also it's the friend who won't pick the restaurant, refuses to pick the restaurant because they're afraid that if nobody likes it, then everybody's going to blame them for picking the restaurant. So that's the excuse maker. And then the final one is the pessimist. And the pessimist is, more than any of the others, often someone who has experienced a lot of hardship or tragedy or adversity in their life. And what it really is the underlying fear is a fear of pain or a fear of adversity that comes because they've had hard things happen. And so they sort of get stuck there in that victimhood or that victimness of feeling like, why should I even bother? Things are never going to turn out because they've never, nobody knows what I've been through, and I've had such hard things happen to me that it's not even worth trying anymore. So that was all 7 in a nutshell.
Love reading, but wish you had more time to get into your favorite books? What if you could use the time you already have and listen to the books you already love? Well, now you can with Audible. With Audible books, you can be inspired, entertained, and educated anywhere, anytime. Choose from the bestsellers in self-development, business, nonfiction, and more. So what are you waiting for? Your first 30 days are free. Visit hisandhermoney.com/audible to get started today. That's hisandhermoney.com/audible.
Correct us if we're wrong. You actually have a quiz that people can take, right? And we'll make sure that we include the links in the description box below. If you want to know what your archetype or what your fear is, definitely check the description box for the link.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think that the assessment is good because you can't really wiggle your way out of it. Like the questions, the questions were very well done. That's why at the end, like I don't know, I just had in my mind it was going to come out one way, and then I got hit with people
the very
pleaser.
thing that you think I am, you got hit with.
You know what I mean? So we highly suggest, if you don't do anything else, take the quiz because it'll help launch you on a journey of self-exploration. Now, fear, like we've said, is powerful, right? It's power. It's a very powerful emotion. And if it doesn't stop you in your tracks, oftentimes it reroutes you and makes you go in a different direction than you initially intended, right? But the concept that you're teaching us is to do it scared, right? Yes. Which is a noble concept. But when fear is present, when that moment arises and you feel paralyzed, stuck, scared, how do we do it in that moment? What's your advice there?
Yeah, so I love that question because it starts with that identifying, right? So we turn it from being subconscious to conscious, but then we have to start to consciously change our thoughts. It all starts with what's happening in here before we can actually start to take the action. So my next advice for people, once you've really had a chance to dive in and figure out, okay, what does fear look like for me? How is it impacting my life? How is it manifesting? Is to start to adopt what I call the principles of courage. And it's just a new way of thinking, a new sort of set of core beliefs, of core values that help you to change those thought patterns that were happening before. Because if you don't replace them, they're going to keep happening. And so it's starting to tell yourself things like rules are for suckers and there are no mistakes, only lessons, or that you have to always own it no matter what, or to just keep going. Those are some of the principles of courage. And I in the book, of course, I dive into each one and really flesh them out and explain what that looks like and what that means. But that's where the hard work starts to happen, because you're changing your mindset. And as we all know, most of what we want to do in life is so related to how we can impact our mindset and change our mindset.
I was going to just say this. What was one time in your life, as a matter of fact, we can speak of recently, that you did something scared?
You talking to me or
I'm
Ruth?
talking to you.
Oh, well, obviously the first thing that comes to my mind is that I just recently resigned from my job, and now we do His and Her Money full time. That was something that was out, not even a thought. Maybe 10 years ago, I was always at that season in my life was provider mode. I have to go to work and make sure that my wife and my kids, they don't have anything in the world. If Ty can take the risk, she can try entrepreneurial things, but I'll be the stabilizing force, and I'll just be 9 to 5, 1st and 15th. That's all I want. I've even made the statement before, I'll never be an entrepreneur. That's not my style. I'm not made that way. And so over time, over this whole journey that God has taken me on, taken us on together, my mind just changed. And suddenly it became a goal to do His and Her Money full time, because we believe in the mission behind this company so much. And we've seen the impact that it's had on people. It became more of a goal to do it in a full-time basis, but the fear was still there. Mm-hmm. I did not want to jeopardize. I still have that mentality. I don't want to put my wife and my family at risk, and you beat me up not too long ago about these thoughts. And I got Ruth, as we call it. And but still there was that fear, and it just got to the point where I knew without a shadow of a doubt that God said now. Once I knew that I was in alignment with God's will, for me, that dissipated a lot of the fear. It wasn't 100% gone, but enough of it got out the way that I was able to move forward.
Yeah. And I was reminded of same thing. Although you had your fear from a different place, my fear was a lot of unspoken fear. A lot of times I didn't want him to see me having concern, but in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do about this, this, and that?
Mm-hmm.
But one thing that I realized is that fear is it paralyzes you. Once you cross over and cross past that fear and you see what's on the other side, you're like, how come I didn't do this sooner? You know, and that's why I think that your book is coming out at such a great time, because I think a lot of people need to first recognize that they do have fears, and
it's
then
real.
And it's real, right?
Yeah.
Yes.
And what can you do about it to conquer your fears? Because I think that your fears are holding you back. They're holding you back from such potential, such promotion, just holding you back from so many different things.
And it doesn't have to, and I think that's really the purpose behind, or the idea of Do It Scared. It's not that the fear is not going to still be there. It will still be there. There will still be things that you're afraid of. But what you can do is start to build up your immunity to the fear and not let it control you. So you practice in small ways, taking small steps that help you build up your courage muscle and make you realize, oh my gosh, I just did this hard thing. And now I dare to do the next hard thing and the next hard thing. And before you know it, you're doing harder and harder things. And even though you might still feel the fear and you might still be afraid, you also have the confidence to know I've done hard things and I survived, and I've made mistakes, but I've learned from them, and I can do more hard things in the future. And it keeps you pushing further and further forward. And that's how you get to where you want to go.
I like the word that you just used, confidence. I feel that. I feel like it does give you another level of confidence. Like, if I could do that, then I can do this.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. So true. I'm so excited for you guys and so proud of you. I can't even tell you. I can't, like, it just like fills my heart, because I did kind of give you a really hard time, and
it was done with love, though.
It was
out of love. And I mean, and maybe that was the push you needed, because as a people,
that was a defining moment. It was more,
a permission from somebody to go, you can do this.
And I think that's also a point that you bring out in the book. No matter what your archetype is, it's important to have accountability.
Mm-hmm.
And it's important to have accountability that doesn't have the same fear type as you, so that they can push you and hold you accountable to the things that you're trying to do in life. So can you talk about accountability and why that's important with being able to position ourselves to do it scared?
So true. Yes. Having those truth tellers in your life that will say the hard things that need to be said, and yet say them with love and be your biggest cheerleaders at the same time. Those are the people that are going to push you to be better and push you to really go past your comfort zone, because that's where all the magic happens, in that place that's right outside your comfort zone and what feels safe. It has to be a little beyond that.
Yeah, and I think that, and this is, it just literally dawned on me, and this was not planned, but in the book, you said that a good accountability person for a people pleaser is an outcast. Uh-huh. And you are an outcast. I just dawned on me.
Yeah, because outcasts don't care what other people do.
Right.
Other people.
Love it. I absolutely love it.
Man, so I just think that this is a topic. I'm glad you wrote this book.
Yeah.
I'm glad you dove deep, because this, I think a thing that happens to too many of us is we might recognize that we have a fear, but our default is to ignore the fear. Mm-hmm. Our default is not to face it, not to address it, not to overcome it. It's to, well, I'm scared of this. I have a fear of this, so I'm going to avoid this, right? Mm-hmm. Why is that a toxic viewpoint of fear?
Well, because if you're just burying your head in the sand, then you're never going to get where you want to be. And, I think it's important to clarify that specifically the type of fear that I'm talking about in Do It Scared is not phobias. I'm not talking about the fear of heights or the fear of spiders or something like that, or a medical condition. It's this internal fear that holds us back and keeps us stuck and prevents us from creating the life that we truly want to live. And we each have it. We each have the things, those obstacles that stand in our way. And if you live that life where you decide to stay stuck or decide to just ignore the fear and stay in your safe place, you can do that, but it's not much of a life at the end of the day. I mean, those are the people. And I spoke to more than 4,000 people. We did this huge study, and I will tell you that nothing was more heartbreaking in this study that we did than reading the answers of people who let fear keep them stuck, and the regret that they felt and looking back at their life and going, I wanted to do this thing and I let fear stand in my way. And now 20 years later, 40 years later, 60 years later, I still feel like I messed up and I can never get that back. And I've spent the rest of my life regretting that moment. And what I learned from that is that the fear of or the pain of regret is so much worse than the pain of failure. And so if you can just give yourself that permission, or be more afraid of regret than you are of failure, and give yourself permission to step outside of your comfort zone, even when it feels hard, even when you're doing hard things and pushing yourself past your comfort zone, even when you're making mistakes, you will ultimately give yourself the joy of having the life that you want, because the joy is in the striving, the joy is in the struggle, the joy is in all of the like pain that comes with it, because anytime we do something great, it's always tied to some sort of pain or struggle or something that we really had to work for. And so if you never give yourself that gift of struggle, then you never give yourself the gift of accomplishment either. And that's no way to live.
So good, so good. What would you tell let's go back 20 years ago. Now, knowing what you know now, after writing this amazing book, you've built this amazing company. If you could speak to your fear 20 years ago, what would you tell yourself?
Oh my gosh. I talk about that. Like 20 years ago, I was in the psychiatric hospital. I was this scared 21-year-old girl. And I think that I would go back and tell her that you're not the sum of your mistakes. You're not, because it took me a really long time to learn that. You're not the sum of every bad thing that's ever happened to you. You get to have a choice each and every day. It's something that I tell my kids now. It doesn't matter who has hurt you. It doesn't matter what has happened to you. You have to take responsibility for this day, for your choices, for your actions, because you get to choose. If you choose to let your sister ruin your day because she took your shirt, then that's on you. It's not on her. She has to deal with her own consequences, but you have to control yourself. And I think if I would have learned that lesson sooner, I could have avoided a lot more pain. And yet at the same time, and I talk about this in the book, at the same time, as much as I would not wish anything that I went through in all those years, my early 20s, and many of the mistakes that I've made in my life, I wouldn't want to repeat them. I wouldn't want to wish them on anyone, but I'm not sorry that I experienced that either. I'm not sorry that those things happened to me or that it happened the way that it did, because every step along the way has led me to where I am right now. And without having had those things happen, I don't think I would be the person that I am now, the business owner that I am now. I don't think I would have the marriage that I have now. I don't think I would know how to parent my kids the way that I parent them now. I'm grateful for those experiences. I'm grateful for the mistakes that I've made, and hopefully I've learned from them, but it also gives me the perspective now to be grateful for the mistakes that I make in the present, to know that every mistake I make in the present is a future lesson that I will look back on and know that it taught me something and it helped me become even better. Does that make sense?
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely. So everybody's ready now. I know they are. So tell everybody where to find the book and how they can stay in touch with you.
Well, the book is available for pre-order right now. I'm not sure when this will be airing, but it comes out on May 21st, 2019. And you can get the book anywhere books are sold. I would pre-order it. If you're pre-ordering, I'd do that on Amazon because that's where it's cheapest right now. And then we have also got some amazing bonuses available right now. And one of them includes the premium version of our fear assessment. So there's two versions. There's a free version and then there's a paid version. And the paid version gives you way more detail and goes really in depth and tells you like all of your fear archetypes and and how those top ones work together and interact together. So that's one of the bonuses that come with the book right now. Definitely worth getting that. So you can get all the information for that at doitscared.com. And that's probably all you need to know, doitscared.com.
Ruth, this has been amazing. As always, you never let us down. We appreciate you again coming on and sharing this very needed information with us today.
Yes, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, you guys. I just love you guys so much, and I'm so grateful to you, and I'm so honored to be back again.